Hi, welcome to today's Alteryx how-to video, for the lack of something better to call it. And we're going to talk a little bit about some Alteryx reporting workflows. Previous to this, we've done most of our work in looking at how to massage and manipulate your data to make it look more accurate, have missing attributes, all those other things that Alteryx is very good at. Sometimes all you want to do is prep your data so that your reporting becomes much easier. And the example we talk about today is a standard type of dashboard report where what you're looking at presenting is the percentage of actions within an overall larger population. Sometimes it's considered a demographic report, sometimes it's considered a percentage report, and a lot of times I was first introduced to it when someone says, hey, I need to know how to do a numerator denominator query. And I just sort of had to go, what are you talking about? And it's essentially where you have an overall population of events or people or things or places. And you categorize them through some demographic, and you want to know how many of those events or people fit within a subset demographic as compared to the overall population, hence the percentage. You take a numerator people in the demographic divided by the denominator, which is the universe of events. When you write a SQL Select statement to do this, it is a pretty intense query to write, but you can write it, and I've written many of them in the past. Once you understand how Alteryx works, and how data stores within a data mart work, there's some very easy tricks that you can do to allow yourself to create that reporting data set so that when you get to something to report it with, such as business objects, your query becomes very easy and straightforward. That's one reason why I'm very happy with a lot of organizations that I've been associated with, that once they got into self-service data analytics, they've given the analysts somewhere to store their data. Because once you can store the data, reporting from it becomes much easier. So we're going to actually look at two workflows. One is to actually build the data set that we'll be using, and the second one will be to actually use that in an Alteryx version of reporting to show you a couple of tricks with Alteryx reporting. So what we're going to be looking at first of all is to create a table, and it's going to have in it the overall reporting that we want to do. The data model that I created for this exercise started with the puppy performance details, which were created originally as part of this subject area. And within this, if you notice, we have in here the duration in minutes of a puppy's performance. And what we want to do is two things. One is we want to understand and report on how many young puppies are performing tricks. And this we can arbitrarily define what a young puppy is, and so we'll want to be able to count the number of performances that a puppy had when they were young and compare it to the overall performance of tricks. And the second metric that we want to calculate is what's considered a short performance. And again, arbitrarily choosing a value, what we want to look at is if the puppy's performance of that trick in a specific month was shorter than the average performance for that trick in a given month, then they're part of the in population. This one is a little bit trickier than the first one, and we'll do them both so you can see the differences. What we'll be doing is storing them into this puppy performance table, and we'll be creating what's considered indicator variables, a 1 if they are in population and a 0 if they're not within population. And that'll be put into these two indicators here. So taking a look at the workflow that I put together, wanted to highlight just the middle of this, and using my documentation tool containers, I can isolate that out so you don't need to see it. But we'll look here just actually prepping the data, and all that we're doing in the data prep part of this workflow is all the joins to get our data together. So we have our fact table surrounded by the dimensions and including that performance input or raw data table. We'll look at a better way of doing this when we get to the reporting side of it, but this is essentially blending all the data together to get us all the pieces of information we need to do any of these calculations. But where the core of this comes from is, as we can see here, this is all the basic information we need. We have the birth date, the duration, and the performance date. We bring in the date dimensions for a final join, because this is very nice because this goes ahead and gives us this year month, which is where our calculations for percentages is going to come, so that we want to know on a monthly basis what those percentages look like. This is the nice way of having a good date dimension and bringing in a year month. Once joining that together, it is very easy to do our two calculations. And this is where we will split our workflow. If you notice that this piece of data is going to go into two separate flows of data. In the first one, all we're doing is giving our attributes better names and better data types so we can do some further calculations with them. But in the bottom workflow, we are summarizing this data, the duration, by getting an average duration per trick per year month. So now what we have is two data sets. One data set that is the base information, and the second data set, which is that average performance calculation. And once we have these two workflows, it's very easy to put them back by a join, and we would join these data by the trick and month because that's how we summarized it. And ultimately then what we get, and we look at this, you see that no data is left behind. So now each individual puppy record has on it not only the basic information, but it also has on it the average duration in minutes for the trick and the month that this performance occurred in. So now it becomes very easy to do our calculations simply by going into a formula. And this formula then we simply calculate a couple of things. When I'm working on a new workflow, I always like to leave pieces of information behind so that I can go ahead and verify how things are working. So my first attribute or field that I create is the difference in days between the birth of the puppy and their performance. I divide that by 7 to get the number of weeks that they are old, their age and number of weeks at that point in time. If their age is less than 12 weeks, then it's considered a young performer, and I give it a 1 into this indicator variable, otherwise it gets a 0. Then the next field that I create and calculate is the indicator to show if it's a short performance. So if the duration in minutes is less than the average duration in minutes, it gets an indicator of 1, otherwise it gets an indicator of 0. I go ahead and add my timestamp to this record and then ultimately clean it up so that now I have my dimensions. I have the facts according to what the duration is and their age when they did that performance. Indicators whether it's a short performance or a young performer. 1s and 0s, 1s indicating that they are within the demographics and a 0 that they are not within that demographic. This becomes very easy for me now to create reporting within my favorite reporting tool, which case this happens to be Alteryx. Something I did here just a peace of mind is I did a real quick unique check to make sure that I wasn't somehow getting extra data into it. So what I wanted to make sure is that I knew what the primary key was so I could create an effective table and not have any confusions for multiple records being occurring. To do that, I just did this summarization. in the out of the unique, you can see that I have gotten no records, so therefore I have indeed identified what is unique. So that makes me confident that the data will be good for reporting purposes. And then the other thing that I have in here just for testing purposes and for expediency of running these, the actual creating of the table going into my SQL database, very straightforward and simple, but I've put that inside of a documentation tool container so that then I can turn them off if I don't want to do them as part of the execution at any point in time. So this gets me my data. As you can see what it looks like here in the browse. So now all I want to do is create my short performance. We will quickly take a look at what I want the output to appear. One piece of this report data is this type of graph. And this shows that for the Colorado puppies kennel, these are the years and months by which the puppies had performances. And these are the report points to show the percentage of these puppies that had short performances. So you can see that as time went on, it was fairly random. Sometimes the puppies in this kennel had short performances and sometimes they had long performances. But if I saw anything really bad in here, something I might want to look into to figure out if they are always very high in the short performance, I might want to look at what's going on. Or if they're very long, I might want to look at that as well. But this again gives me an idea of how this population is performing against a metric that we want to use. How I generated this report is from within Alteryx. And what I want to show here is that because if you look at the data model for this fact table, you can see that it has all of the dimensions surrounding it with information within those dimensions that I would probably want to report from. And what typically happens is people do not like star schemas because they say they have to join a lot of tables together in order to get their queries, and that is true. In one of my earlier videos, we talked about creating views to make it easier to get your data out of the database. And within a star schema, it's nice to have a view that joins all the dimensions to the fact table. If this tends to be a non-performant view in some circumstances, you can break it into smaller pieces. For example, if someone doesn't always want to see the costume when they're looking at a performance, you might make a without costume view. But in this case, I will create a view called puppy performance view. I will retrieve the attributes from each of the dimensions as well as the fact table. And I'll take that fact table and join it to all of its dimensions so that when I use this data or want to use this data within Alteryx, I don't have to actually query and join all of these each time as I did when I built the data set. So if we look at that percentage report that I generated, we can run this while we talk. What I've done here inside of the input data is I've given it the name of the view to query against as opposed to just the table names and doing all the joins. So this will pre-join all the data for me. Within the select, I decide which of those pieces of data I actually need for my report. And then very easily, in order to do this numerator denominator type reporting, all I have to do is to group the data by the attributes who I want to summarize it at. In this case, we will be grouping it by the year, month, and the kennel's name. If I summarize, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see the attributes. If I sum the short performance indicators, this will show me the number of puppies that were within the demographics. And if I simply count the short performance indicator itself, this shows me the overall number of puppies that had performances. Numerator, denominator. Leads us to the point of simply going in and doing that calculation. Short performance count divided by total performance count times 100 gives me that average. Take a look at the data. You can see here what it shows me then is that for each month, we have the year, the kennel, the number of short performances, and the total number of performances, and the averages. So this is my entire data set to do with this. To get a nice report out of this, I bring up an interactive chart widget. That is, if we go back here just briefly, your data reporting, there's reporting, and we have the interactive chart. We've configured it. In this case, all I did is went ahead and made my x-axis the year month, the y-axis the short performance percentage, and then I've further grouped the data by kennel name, so it will give me a line for each kennel and give me a legend that shows which color associates with which of the puppies, kennels. It's a very messy looking report. So that's why I created a second report that is basically the basics of the first report. But one thing I've done here is in the batch, I've batched it by kennel name. So what this will do is give me multiple reports, one for each of the specific kennels. I want to get all those reports into one PDF. So my rendering is PDF. Got this error because I currently have that open, so I can show it to you. I get both of these records into this single report by doing a union of the two report output records. So if you can look at the output from each of these reports, you have one record. The union actually gives you multiple records because, again, this one had multiple records on it. This one had a single. So now I have the overall report and then a report for each of the kennels. Put that into a PDF file. I also can browse it, by the way. So I can actually look through this one at a time. I can see each of the reports interactively. It looks a whole lot better and easier to see. If we come into the PDF file, and you can see that then this single PDF has a page for all the kennels on one chart, and then one additional page for each of the kennels individually. So I can take a look at how each individual kennel is doing. Not necessarily the best way of doing this reporting, not the best, most friendly, but it's a quick way to take a look at that data. And so then you can then hand this over to your BI people, unless you happen to be the BI person. Show them how easy the query is that they get to write going against this wonderful data set that you created. And then they can create a very dynamic dashboard and make all of the business people happy because they can understand how your performances are going and how each of the kennels are doing. Hope this helps with your reporting and understand how you can extract data and make your reporting easier doing denominator and numerator denominator calculations, identifying using an indicator to which of the puppies are inside of the demographics and which are not in the demographics, making it very easy to do your query. And it will make the BI people very happy with you. Subscribe to my channel. Send me any questions or comments that you have. I will address questions. I will look at comments. And if you have any additional needs, I'll be happy to do videos to address your specific needs. Drop me a note. Have a great day.